The Young Master in the Shadows. Chapter 01, Reborn. He has locked himself in the Royal Library's secret room. He was going to perform a forbidden ritual. The angry shouts of the guards who were pounding on the door with their heavy axes did not faze him. These doors were meant to keep people out. This ritual was his last hope. He didn't have enough data and was unsure if this would work. But he didn't have much time left. It's now or never. His lifespan was already over, and he would not live to see the morning sun anyway. He could barely use his shaking hands to hold the black book and activate it with a drop of his blood when the iron doors were blasted open and the world turned white. The headache made him wake up. Where am I? Victor thought. Looking around him, he saw that he was laying on a big bed in the center of a lavish room with a high, decorated ceiling and ornamented wallpapers. He had succeeded. It was a huge gamble, but he pulled it off. He had just returned 200 years to the modern age, to the time when he was still a teenager. He is now in his old room. He lived in here when he was a kid. This is the mansion of his father, who is one of the elders of the von Weiss family, one of the 5 hidden families who control the old continent. His name is Victor von Weiss, one of the family heirs. His childhood hair was not a happy one. Although he was one of the family's legitimate heirs, he had a weak body. He failed to master the family's secret art, which all the descendants were required to practice. His failure led to him having lower status than his peers. After that, he was barely qualified in the coming-of-age ceremony, a ritual that every true von Weiss has to go through. So he was assigned a minor role in the family where he was able to enjoy life for a few years. But his life changed when he was led to a trap by his enemies. And he had to break a family rule to save a friend. But in this kind of family, rules can't be broken, so he was kicked out and had to live the next 20 years in suffering and poverty. Then the reckoning night came, that's what they called it. That day when the rules of the world evolved. Numerous things changed that night, and one of them was his destiny. He was able to awaken his noble bloodline. When he returned to the family to prove himself and take what's rightfully his, it was too late. His family seemed to have angered some rising hero and were wiped out in one night, leaving the land where its mansions once stood tall a desolate ruin. No one survived, and all of his loved ones were dead. And he could do nothing. That guy was very powerful, another league type of powerful. He wandered around the new world as a loner for a few years, then settled down, fell in love, and had a family. But the past always hunted him. The one who annihilated his family back then found him. And from his mouth, Victor learned about what happened back then. That man, after wiping out the von Weiss family, discovered the truth about their immortal bloodline. He wanted it for himself. But he had already ordered the death of everyone in the family. So he had been hunting for Victor ever since, and he had just found his prey. He captured Victor with his children and killed his wife who was deemed useless. Then he brutally extracted their essence blood using an artifact, leaving them to die. Victor survived thanks to a lucky chance. But he was hurt badly, and he knew that he would eventually die as he could feel the immortality granted by his bloodline was fading. He returned to his ancestral home and began to dig in the burnt ruins. He uncovered many secrets there and was able to extend his life by a few decades. But alas, no way to restore his bloodline. His family was only beginning to discover its marvelous uses when they were annihilated. He spent the next decade in research and study, and then, by a pure coincidence, he heard about the Black Book. People knew it was precious since it had a SSS rank artifact, but it was pretty much useless. Its power is time travel. But despite its enormous activation cost, you can only go back in time for 1 second if you use it. And you can only return in mind, not in body. For others, it could only serve as a collection and research item. An extravagant one at that. But, for him, who had seen a similar treasure in his travels and knew about a little bug, it was an amazing treasure. He had some hope at last. To go near the book, he had to take the job of a librarian in the Royal Library where it was kept, and after many years of hard work, He was able to get close enough to it to study it, then activate it. Now he is back. He is going to live a fulfilled life. He will use his knowledge to create a power that no other can rival. And those who hurt him before would pay a heavy price, even if the world itself shelters them, like that guy. First things first, he thought. First, he has to set the things in the family right and prepare his cards for the reckoning at the same time. It's never too early to prepare. The reckoning signs are already there, but only those with good eyes and ears have noticed. The world today is like a child, who will hit puberty at that night. In the current world, the rules are yet to be solidified. The world is like a child who is still naive. Many people got their chances around this time. And now he is going to be the bad uncle who cheats this child. He searched under the pillow for his phone, and there it was, with its shiny gold-plated back. He remembers he used this during his first year in high school. It was a gift from his mother for finishing middle school. Looking at the time. It was now 5:16 a.m., the 21st of June. It was in the summer break, and he will have to start high school in September. But that was not the vital thing. What really matters is the coming-of-age ceremony, which will happen tonight. All pure-blood male members in the family would live under the care of their parents until they reach adulthood, where they would be taught family literature and martial arts. But after the ceremony, they would be granted resources depending on their test results and were expected to do family assignments in the outside world. Luckily, he returned at the right time. If he was late by just one day, things would have been a little troublesome. He jumped out of bed, took off his shirt, and inspected his sickly body. Just as he remembered, he had a small stature, his skin as white as snow, and had a beautiful face. He inherited it from his mother. His silky hair is a dark shade of purple-gray inherited from his father. This purple hair is a unique feature in his family. There were many speculations and rumors about the reason for this color, but he knew it. He learned about it when it was too late, the unique otherworldly bloodline of his family. He has to awaken it as early as possible. Perhaps in the ceremony tonight, there will be a chance. Looking beyond the curtains, out of the huge window near his bed, he could see the expansive forests surrounding the mansion and vaguely glimpse at the roofs of his uncles' and relatives' mansions on the horizon. He could faintly make out the sound of sea waves in the distance. He was on an island. And this entire island was part of his family's base, which only the pure-blood descendants and their servants can live in. At precisely 6 a.m., there was a light knock on the door. A beautiful woman stepped in. Her name was Olivia, one of the maids in the mansion. He remembers her well. She was one of his father's trusted servants and maybe a little more than that. "Young master, I am here to wake you up. The master has instructed that you should be ready for breakfast at 6:30 in the first dining room." Victor nodded his head. "I understand. I will be there on time." The maid bowed, then stepped back and closed the door on her way out. He took a quick shower and then changed his clothes while recalling all the information about his family. His father had 3 official wives in addition to countless concubines and lovers. His mother was the second official wife of his father, and that is because of him, his brother, and 2 sisters. All of them have purple-gray hair and a pure bloodline. Only women who give birth to bloodline heirs are eligible to be wives. The 317th family rule dictates. When his father met his mother, she was just a little model who wanted to score with his super-rich father. But after she gave birth to his eldest sister, she was quickly canonized as an official wife. As for the children who have no bloodline, they are considered illegitimate. If they are talented, they would be given a chance to serve the family. If not, they would just be given some money and education, then left to live their lives. Many successful entrepreneurs and business owners are just illegitimate children from such families. Looking out of the window at the rising sun on the horizon over the forest. "It's time," he thought. A knock on the door, a petite young maid stepped in. She looked at him nervously. "Young master, do you need any help? The mistress asked me to lead you downstairs." "No, I am ready. Let's go." Following the maid, he stepped out of the room and closed the door. Chapter 02, Breakfast. Victor rarely met his father. So having breakfast with Theodore von Weiss was not an insignificant occasion for him and his siblings. As Theodore was a very busy man. He had a lot of businesses and, concubines, to take care of. Stepping into the dining room, Victor looked around and could only sigh. His mother and two stepmothers are already in their positions next to the empty seat at the head of the table. His younger sister and two half-brothers were there too. His older siblings are already adults and have their own households and businesses to attend to. He adjusted his breathing, then cupped his hands and greeted his elders as per the family's tradition. "Good morning, first mother, second mother, third mother," he said with a nervous look on his face. He was not really nervous, but he had to act the part. At that age, he was a very timid young man. "Good morning, Victor, come sit down by my side, your father is about to arrive, this will be your last official breakfast as a member of this household," said his biological mother, Lana Carlson von Weiss, with a broad captivating smile. Although she was the second wife of his father, she was his favorite. His stepmothers didn't like her but couldn't do anything against her. His two older siblings have already fared magnificently during their coming-of-age ceremonies, and they now hold very good positions in the family's hierarchy. His step-sibling was staring at him with contempt in their eyes. He knew that neither they nor their mother held much respect towards him. If it was not for his mother's protection, he would have already been banished from the house. But after the ceremony tonight, she wouldn't be able to help him per family rules, and she wouldn't need to. He had his plans. Just when he reached his chair and prepared to sit down, his father entered the room with his maid Olivia and head butler George right behind him. George was both a very loyal and a very powerful man. It is said that he saved his father's life more than once. He helped Victor a lot in his past life when all others gave up on him. The butler moved the chair for his master. While Victor, his siblings, and his mother stood up in respect and greeted the head of the house. Theodore had purple hair, and a handsome face, with no trace of aging. All von Weiss had long lives. "Are you ready for tonight's ceremony, Victor?" his father asked as he sat at the head of the table. "Yes, father," Victor answered in a low voice while keeping his head down. He has to be low-key, he reminded himself. "Good, we will set off right before noon, and no matter what's your results, you will be an adult after this. I hope you live up to my expectations," he said, but everyone in the family knew that his father had no expectations for him, ever since he failed to reach the initial stage of the secret arts of the family. While all youngsters in the family would have already reached the fourth stage by the time for their ceremonies. "Father, can you tell us about the ceremony?" asked John, one of his stepbrothers. His ceremony would be next year. John was the only son of his third mother, he is younger than him by 1 year. Their relationship was always strained as John always wanted to surpass Victor to get a better position for his mother. If it was just about this, Victor would not care, but John was a vicious beast who would stop at nothing. In his past life, John was one of the culprits of the scheme that caused his banishment. Theodore glared at him. "Don't ask stupid questions, John, you know quite well that the ceremony is a secret, you can only know it in detail when it's your time," his father rebuked. John flinched from his father's harsh stare, then he quickly found an excuse. "Father, it's just I am concerned about my brother's well-being. Will his life be in danger?" Concerned Victor thought. He knew that his brothers and stepmothers could not wait for him to die. "There is always a risk," Theodore said while looking at his second wife who had a nervous look. "But where there is risk there is reward." "Father means that my brother would be in danger?" he asked while provoking Victor with his poisonous eyes. "As I said, the bigger the risk, the bigger the reward," Theodore said. John looked at Victor and sneered. "Did you hear, bother, you have to be careful." Victor could feel the malice in John's advice. He did not really care, but he acted as if he was frightened and kept his eyes to his plate, while his hands shook a bit, while he continued to have his breakfast in silence. After the meal, his father asked Victor to follow him to the study. Victor naturally knew what this was all about. Entering the lavish study, Theodore firmly closed the door, then ordered his son to sit by the heavy ebony desk while he sat behind it. "You have grown up," said Theodore. "After tonight you will be a full-grown Van Wees. You should do your best not to disgrace the family's name. Your elder siblings have achieved great results in their ceremonies, while I don't expect you to do the same. At least promise me to do your best." His father glared at him with his piercing gaze. "I understand, father," Victor said. "Good. Now, listen well," Theodore said. "It is customary in the family for the father to explain the true family rules and rituals for the candidate on the day of the ceremony. All the family rules you learned till now were made for a reason. It is to protect a secret so profound it can shake the foundation of the world," Theodore said while glaring at Victor's eyes, who had to fake curious look on his face. "You would not believe it, but the best way to explain it is like this." Theodore paused. "Our world has video game rules," he added while glancing at the doubting, shocked look on Victor's face. He continued, "Our ancestor discovered this truth during an expedition to the north 600 years ago. There, he found a cave, and in it, there was an orb. The orb glowed with a faint blue light, and when the ancestor touched it he was amazed at what he saw. A shimmering light veil appeared out of thin air with an alien script. He did not know what the letters were, but magically he could understand their meaning. It said 'player registered.' In old times I would have had to explain what that meant to you, but now you probably guessed thanks to all the time you spent on your console games." Victor looked at his father as if he was questioning his sanity. He did have that look in his previous life, but today he understood the truth far better than his father. Yes, this world had video game rules. And as far as he knows, those rules seem to be slowly integrating into this world. It can be said too that video games' emergence is a phenomenon related to these rules. Of course, our ancestor, Sir Nicholas von Wees, had no idea what that meant, but during his lifetime he was able to figure it out. He brought the orb back to this land and used it as a foundation to build his family. Later he discovered that not only his family had such an item, but there exist others too. "The other 4 oligarchs?" asked Victor. Theodore nodded his head. "That's how we dominate the world. Every artifact like this has its own rules for granting a player status. Sadly, only 1 of every 10 heirs in our family can succeed in becoming a player. Ours has something to do with many factors like bloodline and martial aptitude. And being a virgin is one factor in the assessment. For that reason all heirs are forbidden from being in a relationship before the ceremony," he said as he glared at Victor, who shrank his head. "The player status granted by the orb enabled our family to be one of the strongest families in the world. The secret art that the youth practice is meant to increase the concentration of our bloodline so that we could have a better chance at becoming players. Unfortunately, you could not cultivate it, so your chances would not be good. Of course, he could not practice the art. What he discovered later is that his bloodline is already complete, more complete than his ancestor. He does not need such an art. On the contrary, practicing it is what made him sick and powerless. What he needed was an awakening art." Theodore looked at his son's confused face and continued as if he didn't care if Victor believed him or not. "You would only have 1 chance for awakening using the awakening orb. The younger you are, the better. After touching the orb, it will test your will and bloodline. It will give you points to allocate depending on the results. You would then have to allocate these points as you do in a video game. You must allocate most of your points to the authority field, as it is the most important one. There will be 3 outcomes. If your points were not enough and your authority is 0, you simply die. About 50% of the candidates suffer instant death," Theodore said as if it was nothing, watching Victor's face turn white in shock. "The second outcome is, If your authority is 1, you gain half player status, or what we call a semi-player. You will have some of the strength and perks of a player, but you will not be able to communicate with the world system or level up. The last case is an authority of 2 or more, and you would be labeled as a player, giving you a class and some skills. He explained to the shocked Vector. The higher your authority, the better. It will affect everything from your arts to how much you can level up and grow in the future. As for the other attributes and your class, if you gained 1, you are free to choose your own path. That's all I can tell you for now, and any further discussion will have to wait till after the ceremony. Are we clear? What about you, father? And what about my siblings? Victor asked with a half-believing look, as if he didn't already know. I have an authority of 6 and I am a great warrior. After my ceremony, I had a good start with 3 levels of authority, something that few in the family could achieve, and after that, due to hard work and a certain opportunity, I was able to upgrade to this level. As for your siblings, you will have to ask them yourself. His father answered as if he did not want to waste his breath. It was not that Theodore hated Victor. It's just that he thought that Victor would probably lose his life in the ceremony. And can't help him, every pure blood Van Wees has to go through the ritual, that's the rules, and the rules can't be broken. His father stood up and looked out of the window with his back to Victor. Probably hiding the worry in his eyes. Now go. Say goodbye to your mother and sister. And remember, don't reveal anything to anyone. If anything leaked, you would be punished according to family rules. Yes, father. Victor stepped back while almost failing to hide the shake in his hands. They were not shakes of fear, but excitement. Chapter 03, The Reduction Rune. After leaving the study, Victor's first action was to return to his room. He instructed the maids to pack the last of his luggage. And it will be shipped out after the ceremony. Then after the maids left, Victor sat on his bed and waited while thinking about his next step. This is going to be another gamble, he thought. He had a reason to wait. As there is an important item that he needs for his plan, and this item will be delivered to him at any moment now. He did not have to wait for long, as a few minutes later, the room's heavy door was pushed open. "Ha, brother, I hope you get a good result tonight. I heard about it from my big brother. The ceremony is very dangerous and half of the candidates would die every year." A youth with curly purple hair swaggered into the room with an evil grin. And behind him, an exquisite maid followed in silence. This was Luc Van Wees, the youngest son of the First Lady of the house and Victor's last stepbrother. The maid behind him was his personal maid and bodyguard. If outsiders saw her, they would presume she was Luc's little lover, but Victor knew that the heirs of the Van Wees family were forbidden from getting laid before the coming-of-age ceremony, as it is said to dilute their bloodline. As for poor Victor, he was forbidden from recruiting a maid till his ceremony because he was almost seduced by one when he hit puberty a few years back. That accident ruined his reputation and he was punished very hard by his father and had to spend the rest of his middle school days in an all-boys aristocratic boarding school. Victor looked at Luc and smiled. "I am not afraid, I will make our father proud like my elder brother and sister. I heard that big brother Rex's results were barely passable, and father was so angry with him that he sent him to be a part of the Dark Jungle expedition," he said. The first mother has 3 children, the eldest, Max, is a player. While the second, Rex, is just a semi-player and his father was very disappointed with him back then. And the youngest was Luc, who has yet to be an adult. This lineup put Luc's mother in a tight spot. Victor's mother already has 2 full players' offspring, and there were talks in the family for her to be the main wife. Although his mothers and younger siblings have no knowledge about the hidden rules of the world and who is a player and who is not, they know that some heirs would be more valued than others after the ceremony, and it has to do with some secret test and bloodline purity. Hearing Victor's ridicule, Luc's face turned red with anger. But he was no fool and knew that he can only swallow this bad breath. He can't screw up his brother's plan. He knew that using the thing his father gave him, he can ensure that Victor will disappear forever. "Brother, there is no need for such talk," said Luc with a silly smile. I just came here to wish you a good ceremony, and hope that you will succeed." With that, Luke stepped forward and gave Victor a tight hug, then backed away awkwardly and left the room in a hurry. If his father saw that right now, he would really believe that Luke cared about his brother. Watching her master leave, the maid followed him quickly without forgetting to give a bow to Victor before closing the door on her way out. Victor stared at the door for a moment, then burst into a laugh. "Ha ha, this stupid bother of mine can really act. In my past life I did truly fall for this stupid play of his." Reaching his hand into his jacket's pocket, he took out a pure black octagonal piece of jade. This thing was put there by Luke when he hugged him. "At last, in my past life I was screwed by this rune, but now this will be the key to my success," thought Victor. This jade is called Reduction Rune, and it was a very rare SSS item. Its effect is the permanent reduction by 1 of any attribute defined by the user. However, it also has the passive effect of reducing all the attributes when equipped. Of course, his brother did not know what was this thing nor how to activate it, but he seemed to have figured out that this stone will make the holder weaker. It was probably one of his elder stepbrother's plans. He planned to use it to lower Victor's chances of completing the ritual. In his past life, his brother's plan only half succeeded. With his qualification and bloodline, Victor should have been able to be a full player with ease, but he fell short by just a few points because of the rune, and could only be a semi-player with a very weak position in the family. Victor knew about this plan later, when Luke bragged in front of him on the night of his banishment. He still remembers the ugly smirk on his face to this day. Looking at the jade, Victor sighed. This thing was kept by him in his past life as a memento before discovering its real use. This rune will be the essential key to his next step. Victor took a leather bag from his closet, then put the rune in it, before returning it to his pocket. Holding the rune in a bag will not be considered equipping. Then he adjusted his clothes, and gave his room one last look, then went downstairs. His mother was waiting for him in the hallway. She gave him a tight hug. "Be careful, and no matter what, you have to return alive," she said with tears in the corner of her eyes. She had to act strong. "Yes, mother," he replied while feeling the warmth in his heart. His mother is the only one who has never lost hope in him. His little sister Lara peeked from behind his mother and looked sadly at her brother. "Goodbye, brother," she said, and ran away. But Victor noticed the tears in her eyes as well. Likely she thought that she would never see her brother again. It's probably Luke's instigation. He will take his revenge on him back later. "Are you ready? Let's go, we have a long trip." His father's sound came from the back. "Yes, father," said Victor. Then, after letting go of his mother, he walked out of the mansion's door in silence. Not failing to notice the shadows of his stepbrothers who were smirking while peeking at him from the windows upstairs. Chapter 04. The trip. After leaving the mansion, Victor and Theodore took a 15-minute trip by car to the island's harbor, where a fully serviced yacht was waiting for them. After boarding the yacht, Victor sat down on a fancy seat and looked out of the window to watch the waves, while trying to relax. After a few moments, his father, who was talking to the captain about the course of the trip, entered the cabin and sat on the adjacent seat. "We will be there in 3 hours. The captain informed me that we need to make a detour to pick up some other participants," said Theodore. "Try to relax your mind. It will be over soon," he added. The yacht soon started its engines and began its trip. The family owns an entire archipelago where each island contains facilities that have specified functions such as training, research, or residential. On normal occasions, the residential islands would house the lonely wives and their children with some servants. The husbands are busy doing business or searching for other potential wives on the mainland. Their trip's destination is the central island. It houses the main seat of the family, the elders' halls, as well as the treasury and punishment halls. The ceremony will take place at the ancestral hall at the center of the island. Victor watched the waves go by as he reminisced about this same trip in his past life. He was so nervous back then that he could not focus on anything. Turning his head from the window, he began to observe the maids who were busy preparing drinks for him and his father. While they are called servants by the family, in fact, these girls were all slaves of his family. The family has brought and trained them from their youth so that they would be faithful and loyal to their masters. His father caught his look and could not help but to chuckle a little. Don't worry, after the ceremony, if you manage to survive, depending on your rank you would be given a chance to get your own servants. But if you didn't, I will let a few of these girls accompany you in your grave," he said with an evil smile, making the girls shiver in fright. Victor nodded his head, then took a sip of his freshly brewed coffee that a shivering servant girl just handed him. His father's poor sense of humor never changes. But he knew that he was subtly encouraging him. Like any father, he wished for his son's success. Soon, the yacht came to a stop in a small harbor, and a few passengers boarded. 2 girls and 3 boys. They were Victor's cousins from some branch families. They will also join the ceremony today. They saluted Theodore and Victor, then sat down in their seats nervously. They did not dare make a noise in the presence of the main branch members. The family hierarchy was engraved in their bones. After a few similar stops, the small cabin was almost full, but still, no one dared to sit near the father and son. The ceremony will include family members from different classes, including the direct heirs, talented disciples and servants, who had to spend their trip on the deck. The yacht made one last stop, however, this time only 2 passengers boarded. One middle-aged man with a pointy beard and one burly proud youth who had his nose pointed to the ceiling. When they entered the cabin, all the 20 participants seated inside stood up and saluted in respect, but the 2 didn't even look at them, just continued their way till they reached Victor and his father. They were Victor's third uncle Patrick and his son Ron, who saluted Theodore, then sat down with his father on 2 opposing seats while giving Victor a mocking look as if he was looking at a dead man. "It's been a while, Theodore. How is your business these days?" Patrick said to Victor's father while completely ignoring him. "It's all good. You have been busy yourself lately. I heard you opened a new pharmaceutical company." Theodore replied, "I see your son has grown up." He examined Ron. "He should be able to succeed today, like his big brother did back then, I hope." "Yes, he has already reached the 3rd level of the secret art. I have high expectations for him," Patrick said while casting an approving gaze onto his son, who raised his chin, trying to look valiant. While still ignoring Victor, Patrick continued, "I heard you found a new concubine. It had been said that she is already pregnant. You already have 3 wives and 3 player sons. Aren't you planning on stopping with this wife hunting routine? It's not good for your health?" he asked with little annoyance and envy on his face. "Why would I?" answered Theodore with a proud look. "And it's not like I am actively hunting for wives, but I do run a media production company after all." Victor's grandfather, the current patriarch of the von Weiss family, has only one wife who gave birth to 5 sons and 1 daughter. Theodore, who was the 5th and youngest child, already have 3 wives and many heirs, while his older brothers only have 1 wife each and 1 or 2 qualified heirs. And it is not that they are faithful to their wives, but finding a spouse who gives birth to a pure blood heir is no easy feat. Each of his uncles has already slept with hundreds of women, but only a handful of women were suitable. Ron looked at his uncle Theodore with envy. After the ceremony, he intends to sleep with 100 women in one go. Then he looked at Victor with contempt. "Not like this cripple who would probably die tonight," he thought. Victor, who was watching from the side, figured out exactly what Ron was thinking about. It was easy to tell from the perverted look in his eyes, but he knew that unfortunately Ron will not live past tonight. The ceremony hall's graveyard will be his resting ground. The cabin was silent for the remainder of the journey, as both Theodore and Patrick, despite their relaxed looks, were nervous for their sons, and the rest of the passengers dared not make any noise. It was almost late afternoon when the yacht came to its final destination. The central island was the biggest in the archipelago. It contained the central administration of the family as well as a fully functioning military base and an on-water airport. In fact, in the past World War, Some idiot tried to invade the islands but ended up having his entire fleet decimated. Since then, no one dared to make a move on the family. The island looked as magnificent as ever, thought Victor as he gazed upon the towering mountain in the center of the island. There, in the awakening hall, he will take his first step. The yacht was anchored in the harbor, and the passengers stood up in respect while waiting for the main branch members to disembark first. The two father and son pairs soon went ashore, followed by the rest, where there was a full convoy of cars waiting for them, so they boarded them and headed up the central mountain to the ancestral hall. During the journey, Victor made sure to keep a timid, anxious look on his face, which made his cousins give him a disgusting look. Everyone had heard the rumors. They are better than him, they thought. But Victor did not care. He knew that many of them would not survive the ceremony. And that in this place, there exists many enemies and many opportunities. Chapter 05, The Girl. Presumptuous, how dare you trespass into this hall? Don't you know your place? I am going to make an example out of you. When the convoy reached the outer gate of the ancestral hall, there were a lot of people gathered, most of them were assistants and guards. There seemed to be some kind of trouble. An old man with a short white beard wearing an elder's purple cape was scolding a petite girl in a black dirty tight suit who had a dark black unkempt hair covering her face. She seemed to be injured, was shaking, and kept her face to the ground, anticipating her grim fate. The family never forgives rule breakers. Uncle Patrick stepped down from the car followed by the rest of the passengers. Looking at the gathered crowds, he quickly signaled one of the guards and asked him what's going on. Master, this girl is a trainee slave from the Assassin's Hall. She was caught by the guards after trying to sneak into the ancestral hall. The bowing guard reported respectfully. Looking at the girl, Victor happens to remember such an incident from his past life and knew that the girl will be killed in a very gruesome way by his uncle because of the delay she caused. He was angry. Victor can't allow that to happen this time. This girl has a big secret, and if he put his hands on her, she can bring him huge benefits in the future. He had to act fast. He suddenly stepped forward before his uncle could act, and to the astonishment of his father and uncle pulled the girl's hair back with his hand, revealing a delicate face covered by blood and dirt. It seems she had a fight with the guards. Impressive, he thought. Her features were not clear, but everyone could see how beautiful her black eyes were. I like you, girl, he said in a perverted way to the astonished girl. Then he turned to his father and said, Esteemed father, I wish for this girl to be my servant. As far as I know, every heir has the right to choose a servant before his ceremony, and this son had not yet chosen any. I would like to request that this girl would be my servant and attend to me before and during the ceremony. The elder was angered by this arrogant youth's interference and was about to blast him into pieces when he noticed Theodore and Patrick, who had black lines all over their foreheads. Everyone heard the rumors about Victor being a pervert, and this guy just proved the rumors true. Theodore did not know what Victor was playing at, and he was angry with him for causing such a fuss, but he had a face to keep, and his son's face was the same as his face. However, there will be punishment for Victor later. If he lived anyway, he thought. He will consider this Victor's final wish and fulfill it for him, he decided. So Theodore looked at the elder and said after he cleared his throat, Elder Ross, excuse our interference in your duties. This is my son Victor, who has come to participate in the ceremony, and he seems to be interested in this girl. Then he looked at the girl. I just heard that you trespassed onto the ancestral ground. May I know the reason? He asked her. The elder did not like how Theodore is meddling in his job, but he can't be careless, as Theodore held a very prestigious position in the family, while he was just a management elder from a branch family. Looking harshly at the girl, he rebuked, answer tch, why we're trespassing on the ancestral ground. The girl shook while biting her little lip, then answered in a crystal voice, Master Elder, I wanted to volunteer to be one of the servants attending for the young masters and try to attend the ceremony. While having a bloodline is important, some people have other talents and can pass the ceremony without it. But their chance is slim. From every 10 servants only one usually survives, The survivors who can awaken are usually those who have great talent and a huge amount of luck, and usually, only those servants who were forced by their masters or have a lot of courage attend the ceremony. If they can become players, they would no longer be treated badly, on the contrary their standing would be better than a lot of the family's disciples. Theodore's butler George is such an example. He was Theodore's servant during the ceremony and he benefited greatly. The elder locked his eyebrows. There was an announcement for participation requests 2 weeks ago, now the deadline has already passed. You should have been nominated by your hall master, it is not up to you. He said with annoyance. The girl kept biting her lip. My hall master chose not to accept my request, so I could only sneak here myself, I am really sorry. The girl said while bowing. There are usually some politics and schemes that go on in the side halls, so it's not unusual for some hall masters to have some agendas. And while it is a big chance for a mere slave to be able to become an awakened, only a few usually volunteers, and the rest is forced to participate by the elders. It seems like her hall master had other plans for her. Victor stepped forward, putting the girl behind his back, and said, "It does not matter, I like her. She is mine now. This young master has already decided." The elder wished he could slap this pervert youth, but he could only look at Theodore and Patrick for guidance. While it is unorthodox for such thing to happen right before the ceremony, every heir has the right to choose a servant before he becomes an adult, and Victor was forbidden by me previously from doing so as a punishment. Theodore said while thoroughly examining his son, "Now I will allow him to choose this girl as a servant, and using my authority as a grand elder, her hall master's permission would not be necessary. I believe this is still in accordance with the rules?" he questioned the elder. "Aye, it is in accordance with the rules." After some hesitation, the elder responded. "Then, let's consider this matter already done. As for the girl's punishment, it will be handled by Victor after the ceremony." Theodore confirmed before looking at his son with a strange light in his eyes. Why did Victor, who was usually timid, display such courage when facing the elder? Let's see. He may be able to survive this after all, he thought. What are we waiting for then? Now that this matter has concluded, let's head inside, Patrick interjected while glaring at Victor. We have duties to attend to, he said, then stepped towards the gate. With that, the crowd diverged, and the participants started heading inside the enormous bronze gate of the hall. After his father and uncle went in, Victor grabbed the delicate hand of the girl and followed them. "Now you are mine, you better behave, or I will chop your head off myself, understood?" he said to her while hurrying forward. "Understood, young master." The girl gratefully looked at him and answered in a soft voice. Chapter 06, The Guide. The ancestral hall was not just one hall as its name suggests, but a complex array of buildings and preparation rooms. It also housed many important treasures and was attended around the clock by many guardians and family elders. Stepping into the entrance, Victor's father and uncle had to leave alone with the elder to prepare for their roles in the ceremony. The participants will have to wait for a while. Before leaving, Theodore gave his son one last examining look. Then without talking turned around and followed his older brother through one of the branching corridors. The ceremony participants were guided respectfully by one of the staff into a grand hall to wait. This hall was not empty as it was already full of other candidates who arrived before from other places. Some were sitting on lavish chairs around round tables discussing the ceremony and sipping on their drinks, while others were standing in respect and waiting nervously. In the family, there are two types of people, players, and non-players. Players are usually ranked according to their authority, level, and skills into elders, core members, inner members, and outer members. Like sects do. While the non-players had 5 levels, first are the elders, followed the unawakened pure bloods of the main branch, the side branch heirs, and those offspring who do not have pure bloodlines comes next, and after that comes the disciples. They are members who were not originally part of the main family but were adopted or accepted as disciples because of their talents, or special family needs for them. They had to change their family name to Von Weiss. In the last tier are the servants, who are the lowest caste in the family and mostly do not have any rights. Of course, within each tier and even between different tiers, different levels exist. Like the punishment hall disciples who only answer to their hall's master. And from every one of these tiers, there will be members participating in the ceremony. Participation for those of pure blood is mandatory, as for the rest it is optional because their mortality rate is much higher. While they were not expected to achieve great results and most likely would die, if even 1% were able to succeed, they would add great power to the family, and they would be like the carp leaping over the dragon gate. In this hall, there were 30 members and disciples sitting around the tables, in addition to about 80 servants standing in the back. To participate in the ceremony, there are 2 conditions. The candidate must have been an adult for no longer than a year. The candidate must be a virgin. When Victor and Ron entered the hall, all the candidates gathered there, looked at them and tensed up. Then everyone stood up and respectfully saluted. Victor and his cousin were the only main branch heirs participants, so their entrance exerted tremendous pressure on the others. Acknowledging the salute with a nod of his head, then finding an empty seat, Victor sat down casually while ignoring his cousin, who passed him with a glare, then went on to find another seat at the other end of the hall, followed by the rest of their convoy. They seemed to have made up their little minds to be on Ron's imaginary team. Victor grabbed the petite servant girl whom he had just acquired and ordered her to sit on his lap, which caused her ears to turn red in shame, but she could only obey. "I am sorry, I am a little dirty," she said while sitting under the astonished look of the observers. "She was not that heavy, I need to feed her more," thought Victor, who was actively confirming the rumor that he is a perverted young master to everyone around, and that was his plan. "That does not matter, what is your name?" he asked. He didn't know her name. "Lily, young master," she answered in a barely audible voice. As a servant she did not have a last name. "Why do you want to participate in the ceremony so bad as to break the rules?" he asked. "And why does your hall master forbids you? Looking at the spider tattooed on your neck, I can tell that you should be from the Assassin's Hall. You don't seem to be that great of a talent that he would not want to sacrifice you," he questioned while gently caressing the tattoo on her small white neck. Every hall and member in the family would tattoo their emblem on their lower members' necks so that they can be identified. But what only players knew was that this tattoo was created using an artifact and can be used to locate and eliminate the servant if needed. Victor would need the family's approval to change this tattoo on her to his own emblem after the ceremony. The girl hesitated a little, then answered his question. "The hall's master intended to gift me to his son after the ceremony. But I hated him, he is a vicious and merciless man. I was tortured by him many times during our training. If ended up in his hand, my destiny will be worse than death. So I thought if I was able to succeed in the ceremony and was valued by some elder, the hall's master will find it hard to force me. Young master, you can look at him. He is also participating in the ceremony today. He is there in the back glaring daggers at you," she said while pointing with her pretty eyes. She did not tell the whole truth, he knew it, and she was trying to use him. He had too much experience to be lied to by a little girl, but he did not care, because he could guess what she wanted to do, and he does not mind helping her a little to gain his trust, so he will not expose her for now. Victor looked at the back of the room, matching his eyes with a remarkably normal brown-haired young man sitting lonely in the back. Really fits to be heir to the Assassin's Hall. If Victor didn't know about this guy, he would have never suspected that he wanted to murder him, let alone notice him at all. But Victor knew him. His name is Guy, and he will betray the family with his father, the Assassin's Hall master, in the future, in about 10 years probably. He has to find a chance to get rid of them. He returned his eyes to Lily, who was trying to act calm. "This ceremony is very dangerous, and the Assassin's Hall's master is a branch family member. His son does not seem to have the bloodline. Is he really willing to sacrifice him for a chance of better status? Using his connection he can easily arrange a manager or a supervisor position for him. he asked Lily, whispering in her blushed ear. Young master, that is exactly what I thought, she answered in a serious tone. He is his father's only child, and he is an evil person. Many of my sisters have suffered in his hands. She had a painful look in her eyes, but, she lowered her voice, I heard a rumor. One night while one of my sisters was accompanying him, he was very drunk, and because he had to keep his virginity and couldn't sleep with her, he could only vent by abusing her. One time she was very hurt and told him that he should die in the ceremony, so he rebuked her and had a slip of tongue. He said that his father has acquired some kind of a rare pill and fed it to him, and he was pretty assured of his success. Luckily, he was very drunk back then and could not remember what he had said. If not, my sister and I would have been already dead by now. She shivered a little while saying that. A pill. Victor thought with a surprise, it can't be. No wonder they betrayed the family back then. It seems the family found out, so they had to escape and seek refuge with other families. He knew exactly what kind of pill it was, as there are only a handful of pills that can increase a candidate's awakening chance. And there is only one kind that can be feasibly if not cheaply acquired by them if they utilized the resources in their hall. But he can't accuse them without solid proof, and he didn't really need to. There are always many methods to get rid of some ants. This will have to wait till after the ceremony. But it did not mean he couldn't interfere with Guy's ceremony. He will have to use a little trick, and if his conclusions were correct, he may be able to cause him some trouble without being discovered. Looking at Guy, Victor smiled then whispered in Lily's small ear, do you want him dead? I dare not, young master, she answered while keeping her face down, but he can hear the desire for revenge in her voice. Whatever, you just need to listen to me, and do exactly as I tell you to. He said and waited for her to nod before he continued whispering in her ear, during the ritual that will happen next, make sure to focus on him, and although it would be painful, the moment you feel a piercing pain in your head, I want you to keep your eyes open looking at him and remind yourself with what he did to you and your sisters. You will need to do this for about a minute and no more, or it will affect your ritual. It will not be easy though. After that, you can return to focusing on your ritual and ignore him completely. Understood? He asked. Yes, young master, she answered. He could hear a hint of doubt in her voice. She did not understand how the ceremony worked nor what it implied. Even the family only had a very rudimentary and experimental knowledge about it. But he understood it well. He didn't spend all those years researching in vain. While he has no idea if this would be effective, if Guy was unlucky, he would end up in a coffin.